Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm Dan, and welcome back to my kitchen for another unboxing and review video. Today, I'm joined by the beautiful Anycubic Kobra X. I am really excited to try this out because I haven't used an Anycubic bed slinger before. I've only ever used their Core XY 3D printers. Let's unbox her, shall we? That's it. Alrighty, so the Anycubic Kobra X is now done being assembled. It only took a few more minutes to assemble than a regular Core XY, but that's because the gantry and the bed are separate. Then again, it was only 8 bolts and just took a few extra steps. The assembly and setup was super quick. The fact that this will hold 4 filament spools and the management system is contained right here is really nice. I am very excited to test this machine out, so I'm going to take it over to the print room and start some prints. Alright, first things first, I'm the realist. Second things second, printer specs. So, the first thing you will notice about this printer is that yes, it is a bed slinger, but it does have some pretty cool features. To start with, the build volume on this printer is actually larger than most Core XY printers on the market, which are only 256 millimeters cubed. This is 260 millimeters cubed. The Kobra X does not have a separate filament system, it is actually all located within the extruder itself. But this printer isn't just multicolor, it can also do multi-material printing. So you can print PLA, TPU, PETG, PVA, and many more. Basically anything that this printer can print, it will print in a multi-material fashion. This printer also comes with the new ACE Gen 2 extruder mechanism, which allows for variable pressure to be applied to different filaments based on their hardness. So it can compensate for the different hardnesses in materials such as PLA or TPU when you're printing them together in a multi-material print. The printer itself also has a 49-point auto-leveling system that runs before every single print to account for any differences in the build plate and ensures that each print is perfect every single time. Another great thing, they have redesigned this hot end to make swapping out the nozzle so much easier. You simply just pop the lever open and the nozzle can be taken out and swapped. The printer can resume printing after power outages, and you can skip parts if there's defects detected during printing. Also, this machine retails for $399. However, with the early bird special, this only costs $279, which is insane for everything I just said. It also has a built-in camera for print monitoring, spaghetti detection, and time lapses.
After powering on the printer for the first time, I ran through the basic startup process. I set the language, connected it to Wi-Fi, and scanned the QR code, which linked the printer to my Anycubic account through the app on my phone. It then ran through the full calibration process, which took about 15 to 20 minutes. After that was completed, I then downloaded and installed the latest firmware on the printer. The filament is placed onto the spool holders above and then pushed into the PTFE tubes until you hear the beep, which lets you know that the printer has identified the filament. If you are using Anycubic branded filament, there is an RFID reader on the front left of the machine that will detect and automatically add the filament settings to the next filament that is loaded. However, if you're using generic filament, you can manually enter the filament details right on the printer screen. The Anycubic Slicer, Anycubic Slicer Next, can be downloaded directly from the website. Once downloaded and installed, you simply add your printer. Since I already bound mine to my account, it showed up automatically after signing in once I selected the printer. For the first print, I found this large flexible scorpion model over on Anycubic's Maker Online. The filament I'm using is this super old color changing filament that's like ancient. It literally snaps whenever I bend it. So I'm going to try it. I dropped it into the slicer, used the stock settings, sliced it, and then sent it to the printer. After just over 4 hours of printing, it finished. 82 grams of filament, and honestly, phenomenal. It adhered really well to the PEI build plate. It popped off the build plate really easily, and the plate side looked very uniform. The print had no warping or layer line shifting. The print itself was extremely nice. All of the joints flexed properly, and the layer lines were super clean. Great first print straight out of the box. Next, I wanted to test the multicolor printing aspect of this printer. I found this octopus over on MakerWorld, and it was perfect because it switches color constantly due to the tiny dots scattered around the model. Over on the printer, I loaded in blue, light blue, white, and black PLA. I dropped the file into the slicer, assigned the correct colors, sliced it, and then sent it over to the printer. After 14 hours, it used 217 grams of filament total. It had great bed adhesion. I was actually able to pop the torso of the octopus up, and the tentacles held the build plate, which an octopus would do. Once I popped the octopus off, you can see that it had extremely clean layer lines. There was no color bleeding or color distortion where it switched colors. The flexibility was consistent throughout the entire print, and everything was very uniform. The printer flushed more filament and waste than it used for the octopus. 99.5 grams of filament was flushed, 33 grams were used in the purge tower, and then 85 grams were used for the print itself. But it is drastically less filament waste than most printers. All in all, the print came out gorgeous. The poop chute. I found a filament poop collector in the local files and printed this in red PLA. I also used filament that I knew would run out before the print finished to test the filament runout sensor and also see the filament resume functionality. With about an hour left, the filament ran out. The printer actually pushes the remaining filament out of the side of the 4-channel PTFE housing when it detects runout. I loaded in the new filament, hit resume, and it continued without any issues. Once it was finished, you can see that it printed very nice. The bottom and top surfaces looked fantastic. There is a slight layer line where it resumed printing once I added the new filament, but I think that's because I did let it sit for a few hours before I resumed the printing. All in all, the print came out great and I love the way it looks. PLA is hard, TPU is soft. Combining them can be somewhat tricky. I used Anycubic black PLA and Polymaker white TPU 95A. I put the spools onto the spool holder and then loaded them into the printer. I want to point out that if the TPU is too soft, it can be a little tricky to push the filament through the PTFE tube and down into the filament sensor. I found that if you pop the PTFE tube off and then push the filament down, it detects it just fine and has no issues. Once the filament was loaded, I found this hexagonal bracelet over on printables. I painted the hexagons to be PLA and then the connecting links as TPU. I left all the stock settings, sliced it, and then sent it to the printer to be printed. And in under an hour, the print was done. There was barely any stringing and it had great layer adhesion between the materials. The PLA and TPU actually stick really well to each other and it's extremely flexible. The TPU loop actually snaps perfectly around the PLA nub and it looks really nice. The print itself was super clean and it was a great hybrid TPU PLA print for my first try. The bracelet was cool, but compliant mechanisms are cooler. I found these pliers over on printables that use PLA and TPU together in one print. I dropped the files in the slicer, assigned the joint as TPU, and left everything else as PLA. I changed absolutely no settings, sliced it, and sent it to the printer. After about 3.5 hours, it finished. There was some moderate stringing, but it was nothing serious. The PLA popped off the build plate, but the TPU sticks pretty well. However, once I got it off, I snipped off all of the stringing and it looked great. They move, flex, and function properly. Could I have dialed in the retraction settings and messed with it a little bit? Sure, but even without tuning it, it still looked fantastic. The pliers can actually be used to pick stuff up and move stuff around, but all in all, this is just a great way to show you how multi-material prints work and function. With all the other prints out of the way, I wanted to test just straight TPU. I found a phone case for a Pixel 10 Pro on printables and dropped it into the slicer. I didn't change any settings and printed it without supports, even though there are overhangs on the phone case itself. After 2.5 hours, it finished, and it came out pretty decent. The main issue, TPU sticks extremely well to PEI build plates. I actually pulled so hard removing it that I slightly tore a section on the back. There was some minor stringing on the part, but I was able to snip all of those parts off super easily. It fit great onto the phone and holds really well. There was a few layer inconsistencies, but all the buttons functioned, and overall it felt really solid. This was a great test for just TPU.
Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for my thoughts on this printer. And I can honestly say, I'm pretty impressed with it. At just $279 with the early bird special, the amount of stuff you're getting with this printer is insane for the price. It is just mind-blowing that these printers are now less than $300. The multicolor printing worked great, the multi-material printing worked great, even though I had some slight issues of stringing on the TPU, but I was using some pretty flexible TPU. Overall, the print quality and consistency has been fantastic. I do like the fact that there's no separate filament system and everything is contained on the printer itself. She has been a pleasure to work with, okay? So I do recommend this printer if you're getting into 3D printing, wanting to get into the hobby, or if you're a parent that wants to get a 3D printer for their kid. So if you are considering getting another printer, or if you're considering getting into this hobby, I do highly recommend this machine as your first printer. It's cheap, it's easy, it's consistent, and it produces great quality prints every single time. The only space it takes up is vertical, which is nice instead of having to have a separate unit next to it that takes up even more space. While they typically don't print multicolor or multi-material, it is still great to have just in case I do want to use that. And it clearly shows. Being able to print multi-material parts is really cool, and it's a step in the right direction. So with all of that being said, I want to say thank you to Anycubic for sending me this printer, and thank you guys for watching this video. All of the links for everything you see in this video will be in the description below, and I'll catch you in the next one.